China's not an enemy. And I think that's important for people to clearly understand. They are going to develop themselves and are developing themselves into a great power. That is not to say, however, that they are an enemy.
Okay. Joining me now, Christina Wong, of course, our outstanding Pentagon contact, courtesy of Breitbart News. Christina, Mark Milley. Okay, so China's not our enemy. He's going to give China a heads up before Trump attacks. And now somebody advised Joe Biden not to shoot down a spy balloon until it completed its mission. How worried about Mark Milley do I need to be?
Well, thanks for having me on, Jesse. I think we need to be really worried about Mark Milley. So Biden claims that he wanted to shoot down the balloon on Wednesday, yet the balloon didn't get shot down until Saturday. Why was the balloon even allowed to enter our airspace? We saw it coming. We saw it go over Alaska, into Canada, into the U.S. Why wasn't it shot down before it hit Alaska or the continental U.S.? Mark Milley has that back channel with his counterpart. Why didn't he talk to his counterpart then? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered.
That's a very good question. Why not pick up that same phone he was going to use to tattletale on Trump? Okay, I have another question. Did Joe Biden hide this, or did they attempt to hide this from the public? Because it really seems like the public kind of found out about this because they looked up in the sky and nobody told us. Did they try to hide this whole thing?
So clearly they tried to hide it. The balloon reportedly entered January 28th. The public wasn't briefed on it until February 2nd. So you had 6-7 days of the balloon just heading towards the U.S., floating around the U.S., and allegedly they tried to hide it because Secretary of State Anthony Blinken had an upcoming trip to China. They didn't want to ruin the trip. They were trying to build on momentum from the past, some meeting in Bali. They wanted to get climate deals with China. They don't see China as a threat. And so they didn't want to spoil it. They just hoped that, no one would see the balloon and it would just go on its merry way, collecting information on our sensitive military sites all across the country, probably praying that no one would see the balloon.
Christina, Anthony Blinken was scheduled to go to China. Now he's not going to China anymore. Here's a little Blinken.
In light of China's unacceptable action, I am postponing my planned travel this weekend to China. We concluded that conditions were not conducive for a constructive visit at this time.
But that's a lie because he was still going to China after they knew about the balloon. He only canceled the trip after we found out about the balloon. Do I have that right?
You do. And notice that he says postpone. They're not canceling the trip even. They're postponing it. So, as not to send a signal to China that they want to escalate matters. So they're not even canceling the trip. Meanwhile, China's threatening retaliation over us shooting down their balloon in our sovereign territory. So it's pretty clear China's not scared of Biden. He's not scared of this administration. It's really alarming.
President Biden is unwilling to defend our border, defend our skies, and defend our people. He is simply unfit to serve as commander-in-chief. And while you reap the consequences of their failures, the Biden administration seems more interested in woke fantasies than the hard reality Americans face every day. Most Americans simply want to live their lives in freedom and peace. But we are under attack in a left-wing culture war we didn't start and never wanted to fight. Every day we are told we must partake in their rituals, salute their flags, and worship their false idols, all while big government colludes with big tech to strip away the most American thing there is, your freedom of speech. That's not normal. It's crazy. And it's wrong.
Josh, I don't know that I ever take much stock in rebuttals, GOP or Democrat rebuttals. Thought she did pretty well. I'm hopeful we might have somebody here.
So unlike the State of the Union, I actually did make it home in time to catch all of Sarah Huckabee Sanders' response. I thought it was very compelling. I thought she did a very good job. It actually, I mean, most of the time, the State of the Union responses are not particularly memorable. We all remember Marco Rubio with the water bottle, Bobby Jindal when he was a rising star. He kind of infamously flubbed his State of the Union response. So these responses, typically speaking, these are actually very dangerous. It's very possible that you will mess it up more often than will actually increase your stature. But I thought this was the exception rather than the rule. I thought, if anything, Sarah Huckabee Sanders comes away from this a much more kind of reputable figure. And I was already predisposed to like her. I've met her. She comes across as charming. She's informed on the issues. She's off to a great start there in Little Rock in the governor's mansion. She was very good. I mean, she was exceptionally well-spoken. And, you know, she said one thing in that clip that you just showed the viewers here. She spoke of false idols. I love this term. That is a wonderful, wonderful term that I wish more conservatives, more elected Republicans would talk about. The left has so many false idols. They make false idols out of people like the great martyr, the St. George Floyd himself. He's a martyr. He's an avatar, a false idol for Black Lives Matter. There are any number of other false idols, so-called Leah Thomas when it comes to the transgender swimming issue. They have false idols on all of these woke intersectional identity politics coalitions. So if we can kind of frame this broader kind of cultural civilizational struggle, as Sarah Huckabee Sanders framed it, between normalcy and sanity, because that really is, frankly, the choice that is before the American voters at this point. If we can frame it as authentic kind of, you know, religion, kind of authentic kind of Americanism versus false idols, that's a very good framing. I think she's onto something there.
Josh, oftentimes you can tell some things by what people don't say. And I'll be honest with you, this didn't stand out to me. I watched her whole speech as well. But the Trump people certainly picked up on this. She didn't use his name last night, even brought up some things that she had done with him and abstained from using his name. Now, politicians like that don't do things like that on accident. The Trump people are a little peeved about it today. What do you say?
I'll be honest with you, I also did not notice that. You know, you telling me this right now is the first time that I'm hearing that. I don't know. I mean, I honestly would not make a whole ton of that, to be honest with you. I mean, I suppose it's intentional here. But look, the reality is that, you know, there's going to be a competitive primary when it comes to the Republican presidential field in 2024. You know, Ron DeSantis has not announced yet, but all indications are that he probably will. There's, you know, Nikki Haley, apparently. I don't think she's going to win, but she's going to get in here soon. John Bolton, who's obviously also not going to win, kind of sort of announced. So there's going to be a big field here, is the point. And, you know, I think it would be silly, frankly, for Sarah Huckabee Sanders to try to kind of tip her hand as to who she may or may not be supporting. Look, she is the youngest governor in the country, as she told America last night during her response. She is young. She is hungry. She's ambitious. She's gotten in there in Little Rock. She's passing all sorts of good legislation. She was able to kind of tick off some of the boxes last night. Let her focus on the job that she is trying to do. And there's no reason to kind of play the whole kind of presidential politics thing. She was very good, by the way, as White House press secretary. I thought she did a great job in that role. Clearly, it helped kind of elevate her stature to allow her to kind of run for governor. So to that extent, I think that she should be grateful, obviously, to President Trump and everyone who kind of helped her get that role in which she thrived. But this general idea that anyone who served in the Trump administration kind of owes a lifelong kind of vow of loyalty where you will always mention the former boss's name at every opportunity, that's just silly. There's no other way to say it. That's frankly just silly.
Lori Lightfoot's running for re-election in Chicago. Well, here's a little video.
And your solution is?
I just explained it. We have been in Little Village working with those street vendors, understanding what the nature of the crime is, making sure that we're doing things in concert with them to help them make sure that their money is secure, not use money, if at all possible, using other forms of transactions to take care of themselves.
So that's a solution for crime. Hey, just no more cash. All right, Adam. People voting Democrat in cities. I'll never understand this. New York City is like 65, 70% Democrat. Same thing, Chicago, LA. These people who live in these cities will complain all day long. I know because I'm always in these cities about the crime and the trash and that this sucks and that sucks. They never have a nice word to say about the city. And yet election time comes around. They all go in and boop, 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 vote Democrat every single time. Explain that to me.
Actually, I'm really glad you brought this up because there are two sides to this. So for someone like Lori Lightfoot to say that, it's much like when you tell someone who's going to South America, make sure you don't wear nice clothes, nice jewelry, right? You're the one who's trying to live your life, and you have to be in constant thought about someone who's out to do something nefarious. And in America, we shouldn't necessarily live like that. That shouldn't be a commonality. And, you know, there are always going to be bad neighborhoods, no matter what country you go to. That exists. And you should be vigilant about it. But when she's telling the entirety of her city, you know, to live that way, I think that that's a sign that things aren't going well. But the point you were making before, why do they keep voting Democrat? And the hard truth that no one wants to admit is that Republicans don't show up in urban city centers. That's the real truth. You know, Chicago, for example, hasn't had a Republican mayor since 1927. That's not by accident, right? We have to ask ourselves, why isn't the RNC or anybody since 1927 tried to do anything? You can look at Louisiana. Louisiana is a red state, yet New Orleans hasn't had a Republican mayor since 1800s, right? The late 1800s. Why is that the case? Is it because the Democrats are so good there? Or is it because there is some sort of collusion or there is some sort of negligence that's happening with the Republican Party? So, you know, and I can go list by list, state by state. The reason I'm actually talking about this more so as well is because I'm working on a piece for the Epoch Times where, you know, the narrative as to why do Black Americans keep voting for Democrats? It's because they live in these urban city centers. 60% of Black Americans live in 10 states. You can name those states by the cities that they're in. They're voting for what is there. And oftentimes, city council, there's no Republican option. Mayor, there's no Republican option. They're voting for the party that is actually there. So we have to ask ourselves, why aren't the Republicans there? And then every 4 years, when they're running for the presidency, they wait for Pennsylvania to show up. It's all red in the rural counties and suburban counties. But as soon as Philadelphia pops up, it goes blue. As soon as Pittsburgh pops up, it's blue. Then they lose the state and wonder why that happens every 4 years. So I really do think that Republicans have to start looking at their party and asking that question, where the hell are you?
One of the most revealing conversations I ever had was with Joe Collins, who was running against Maxine Waters in California, Compton, I believe, if memory serves me. And he would tell me routinely, Jesse, most of my constituents or potential constituents have never even met a Republican. That's crazy. Yep. Adam Coleman, thank you, brother. I appreciate it, man. People look at America, and that's what's happening right now to America, and how sad and crazy it is out there, and they want to stop it. Hey, Jesse, how do I help? How do I help? What do we do? What do we do? Well, have you looked after yourself first? Are you mentally ready? Are you physically ready? Are you in a good place to help someone else? Because if you're not, you got to get there first. There are a lot of people in this country that are in a very bad spot mentally. We can't allow ourselves to get there. We won't be able to help anybody. You want to be some 70-year-old man sitting there in diapers?
I am so glad that I am in diapers, and I am so glad that I am a little sissy baby girl. And I am so glad that I know that I will never ever have to be an adult ever again. And I just wish that everybody who wants to be a little sissy girl gets the chance to wear pretty clothes, they get the chance to wear diapers, and they get the chance to be a little baby girl.
You know what strikes me most about insane videos like that is the age of some of these people. That dude is my dad's age. My dad, you know, who plays with his grandsons and rides horses and like lives a normal life. Same age. Why so different? Joining me now, so I can't wait for this, Gad Saad. He's a professor, evolutionary behavioral scientist, and he has a new book out called The Sad Truth About Happiness. Gad, okay, obviously there are about 10 million things I'm sure you could say about that ridiculous, insane video. But again, this is not some confused 14-year-old boy who's succumbed to weird societal pressures and a weird girl in high school. That's a gentleman with lines on his face. Should be working on his 401k. What?
Well, first, great to be with you, Jesse. I hate to say this, but my prophetic satire strikes again. In the parasitic mind, when I am satirizing and mocking some of this stuff, I give the example of my announcing that I will be entering the under 8-year-old judo competition for people who are less than 70 pounds. And I called it trans ageism and trans gravity. If I self-identify of a particular weight, and if I self-identify as being, less than 8 years old, then you have to allow me to participate in that judo championship. I use judo, by the way, because my brother used to be an Olympic judoka. So that's why I use that example of the parasitic mind. And so my prophetic satire strikes again. There's nothing better than freeing ourselves from the pesky shackles of reality. And I think your clip shows exactly that.
Look, I know there's probably a million different ways to answer this, but you wrote the book on it, The Parasitic Mind, on top of your new book. How does a man get to that place? What is it? Is he just mentally ill? Is this drugs? Is this a cry for attention? I don't understand what I'm looking at. I know it's not right, but I don't understand what I'm looking at.
So in that particular case, I don't know, because I'd have to know more about him.
Yeah.
But look, there's something very liberating about the possibility that we are not shackled by, let's say, our genitalia or our age, right? So, and that's actually one of the things that I talk about in the parasitic mind, that all of these parasitic idea pathogens share one thing in common, and which is that they free us from reality. So take, for example, social constructivism, which is the idea that we are all born with equal potentiality. We're born with empty minds. And it's only socialization that makes us into Lionel Messi or Michael Jordan or Albert Einstein. Well, that's perfectly erroneous view, but it frees me from reality, because it basically tells me, hey, look, my son could be the next Lionel Messi or Michael Jordan. So each of these idea pathogens, Jesse, in a sense, are quite liberatory. And in this case, this gentleman is saying, look, I'm not a 70-year-old man. I am an 8-year-old girl. And boy, it's lovely and liberating for us to be anything we want to be on any given Tuesday. It's insane, but that's the world we live in today.
Yeah, that is insane. You know what? I'm glad you brought up insane, because I was marinating on this yesterday when I was driving to work. I can't let this go. I'll never be able to let it go. There's so many parts of COVID I'll never be able to let go. But one of the ones that really hit me was every part of the system selling a lie right off the bat. From the stupid social distancing, which sounds like a child came up with it, to the idiotic mass, one-way aisles in the grocery store. It was like all of society went nuts. Not one part. All of society went nuts. And so many people went along with it. Why did so many people go along with it? I remember so many times looking around with just my jaw hanging open thinking, when did everyone lose their mind but me?
Well, I think it's a form of govern me harder, daddy, right? It's wonderful and again, liberating for someone to be telling me exactly what to do at any given moment. So some of us are very, we're free thinkers. Don't tread on me, don't tread on me and so on. Others say, look, I want to subcontract every one of the minutia of my life to someone else. And if the government tells me to do X, Y, or Z, I don't ask questions and I do it. So I really think it comes from that. I should mention, though, Jesse, that one of the reasons why you and I might have been a bit more reticent to wear the mask, I just discussed this actually on my YouTube channel. A study came out showing that people who are less physically attractive are more likely to want to continue to wear the mask. And I'll speak for both of us. We're both extremely good looking, and therefore we resist not giving this as a gift to the world.
Yes. You know what, Gad, that's a really good point. I just didn't want to deprive anybody, even if it killed me. I wanted them to be able to gaze on my wonderful
You're just
face.
a generous guy, Jesse. You keep giving and giving. You're just that kind of guy.
Okay, all right, Gad, I want to nail down on something you just brought up. The subcontracting out parts of your life. I understand that. I do. I understand that the human nature is many people kind of want to be slaves. That is just the history of the world. It's a simpler life. Maybe not a better life, but a simpler life. One part that I'll never understand, though, is how family treated family. I call it the great sorting, but look, I could show you a million emails. I'm sure you've had them. Mothers whose children wouldn't let them visit anymore. Children who wouldn't let their parents visit anymore. Brother cutting off brother. It was odd over something that that really wasn't that serious. Help me explain how you could be so manipulated that you would just blow up your whole family for it. That doesn't make sense.
Well, I actually recently gave an example. It was a few months ago. I had tweeted out, I know you appeared on Tucker Carlson yesterday, and it relates to that, to Tucker. I had tweeted out that, hey, thank you, Tucker, for inviting me on to your long forms podcast. Thank you for being so gracious to my family and so on. A cousin of mine, Jesse, who went through the Lebanese civil war with me. So if you're thinking about, affiliative bonding, few things are going to link you to another person than when you're both gone through the Lebanese civil war. Publicly, he writes and says to me publicly on Twitter, "Are you serious?" or something to that effect. "Have you no shame?" So this cousin of mine who went through the Lebanese civil war was publicly repudiating me for saying thank you to Tucker Carlson for having gone on his show. And he was my closest friend growing up in Lebanon. So to your point, tribalism can be one ugly cancer, and being in a family won't protect you when you're viewing the world as us versus them.
Trump obviously had some social media posts that were making the rounds yesterday. Just toss a little mud at Heavy D. That's what people do in the primary. Ron DeSantis came out today and did what he's been doing and basically just said, look at the scoreboard. Here it is.
And I'd also just say this. I spend my time delivering results for the people of Florida and fighting against Joe Biden. That's how I spend my time. I don't spend my time trying to smear other Republicans.
Josh, it's obviously to anybody with an IQ above a potato what's going on. Trump is trying to drag DeSantis into the mud because Trump's a brawler and that's where he prefers to fight. DeSantis is going to ignore him very clearly as long as possible and point at the scoreboard. The question is, who's that working better for?
I mean, as of right now, I think that Donald Trump is losing a shadow primary to someone who has not even entered the presidential field yet. I mean, this is very, very icky behavior. But you're right, Jesse. I mean, it is a bit of a throwback to 2016. I mean, full disclosure, I was not a day one Trump supporter in 2016. I was a Ted Cruz guy in that primary. And I remember all too well, I think it was March of 2016, if I'm not mistaken, or at least it was right around that time, when Donald Trump and Roger Stone had the whole kind of National Enquirer thing with Heidi Cruz, Ted Cruz's wife. It was all very kind of sordid stuff. And, you're right that this is the terrain on which Trump prefers to fight. But here is the wager that I think Donald Trump, or at least his kind of inner circle at Mar-a-Lago and MAGA world, what they're making right now. The implicit wager that they seem to be making is that it is that sort of, knockout 10-round fight, knock him up above the head, very kind of dirty, kind of in the mud stuff. They are betting that actually is maybe why Trump won the primary and perhaps ultimately the general election in 2016. I view it very differently. I think that Donald Trump won that primary and won that election in 2016, partially because he's obviously a universal celebrity. The Trump name is kind of, it's interchangeable from Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods. It's a universally, globally recognized name. But he also substantively brought a lot of very important issues to the table. He talked about China. He talked about the border, immigration. He talked about trade in a fundamentally different way than any other candidate on either the right or the left was talking about it. So if I were advising Trump, which I'm obviously not, but if I were advising Trump right now, I would encourage him to focus more on those issues. What are you going to do if you actually are the president? This is such a waste, frankly, Jesse, of everyone's time. But I guess they think that this is how they won it the last time. So they're trying to kind of get the band back together, so to speak. But like I said, I think that right now, Ron DeSantis is winning this shadow primary, which is pretty good concerning he has not even entered the field yet.
Josh Hammer of the Josh Hammer Show. Be good, man. Enjoy Chicago. Get a Polish sausage. I get the feeling now that we as a whole, as a nation, and frankly the Western world, and we look back on it, that there's a bit of shame, and there should be, and how frightened we became as a population and how many of us conducted ourselves. Now, not enough people are ashamed, and the worst people aren't ashamed at all, but many people look back and they think, man, that sucked. I wished I hadn't done that. I wished I hadn't ostracized my brother. I wish I hadn't put a mask on my 10-year-old. I wish I hadn't. But we were ripe for a big scare then. We were a soft population ripe for a big scare. That hasn't changed. We're ripe for another one, aren't we?
Yeah, that's always the case. That's always the case. I mean, the course of the human condition, it alters, but there are certain consistencies and patterns. And one of those things is that there are always things both legitimate and illegitimate and manufactured that people are going to be scared of, right? There are things that are completely reasonable to be scared of. And in fact, if you were not scared of them, you probably wouldn't live very long. But then there's also forces that are out there in the media or within politicians or within certain activist groups and whatever, who are trying to manufacture or even exaggerate certain forms of fear and outrage, because the easier you are to scare, and I would say the easier you are to offend and the easier you are to outrage, the easier you are to control. And if you want to become a sovereign individual and you want to become a powerful and individual with discipline and self-control, you have to be able to resist some of that, because once you're moving from a position of fear, then you're no longer thinking clearly.
Okay, so how do I begin that, Zuby? If I'm one of these types, and look, yep. We forget that there are a lot of men out there. Well, I'll speak to men specifically. There are a lot of 30, 40-year-old men out there. They didn't have a dad, or if they did, they had a crappy one, or one of these limp-wristed losers who never taught them about resilience or pushing through or any skills or self-confidence. So they don't know. They want it. They want to look like Zuby. They want to begin this, but they don't know. They don't know where to begin. How does that guy begin? He's not 10. He's 40.
Yes, get yourself in the weight room, and I'm not even being facetious at all. Right? Start with your own body. Start with your own body, your own mind, your own spirit, your own heart, and work on self-improvement. Take radical accountability, right? No one can work out for you. No one can force you to eat anything. You're totally in control of that. And I think that if you can get your body in check, your mind, your body, and your spirit, these things are all connected. Mental health, physical health, spiritual health, these things are all connected. They're not siloed off. It's important to get yourself in much better shape, and that does not have a positive impact on your mental state. So I think that's a fantastic place to begin. I think people look at it as only something about aesthetics or health or vanity or something like that, and it goes so far beyond that. It has massive cognitive benefits. So I'd say that's a great place to start. And then also work on self-improvement in any other areas, whatever areas it is that you feel that you are deficient in as a man. That could be your finances, it could be your relationships, it could be how you conduct yourself, it could be how you look and how you dress. Take steps to improve that. And it's okay, it's correct for these things to be very incremental. No one is expecting overnight changes, but if you genuinely want to improve yourself, or there's something that you want to learn, or there's something that you want to get better at, then you can do it. And it's a matter of just putting in that effort day in, day out. It's what I do in my own life. It's what I encourage other people to do. I recognize that I'm not perfect. I've still got a long way to go. Hopefully I've got many, many decades more to live and many more things that I hope to achieve and accomplish. And it's just taking it a day at a time and doing your best and genuinely putting in the effort.